with us on a musical journey through some of the most magnificent places on earth. Great towns and cities of Europe, steeped in history and beauty, and resounding with the stories and music of the world's great composers. Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, Grieg, Vivaldi, Tchaikovsky. Just some of the greats in our classical destinations.
Hello, I'm Simon Callow, inviting you on a journey that leads through the lives and times of the great classical composers. We'll be following in their footsteps, through the cities and the landscapes that they lived in, that they loved, and that inspired them, like this astonishingly beautiful city of Prague. But first, let's meet Matt and Nikki, 150 kilometers away near the Austrian border in Český Krumlov.
Welcome to Classical Destinations. I'm Matt Wills.
And I'm Nikki Vasilakis, and we're in the Czech Republic and the stunning town of Český Krumlov.
From here we'll visit Prague and open up some of the more fascinating chapters of that city's history, as well as its music. Dvořák, Smetana.
Even Mozart did well here.
Český Krumlov is located in southern Bohemia, high up on the Bohemian Plateau, about 190 kilometers south of Prague. The Vltava River flows through here on its way towards the country's capital. As it does so, it winds several times through Český Krumlov, almost as if it doesn't want to leave.
This town is an absolute jewel in the crown of Europe. But most of the world doesn't even know it exists. Maybe that's why it's so beautifully preserved.
The castle overlooking the town dates back to around 1250, though most of the building took place between the 14th and 19th centuries. But the biggest changes have taken place since the so-called Velvet Revolution in 1989. With over 80 restaurants opening for business, making this one of the best places to try Czech food. And it is a striking town to look at while one dines.
It seems we're not the only ones who think so. In 1992, this whole complex was added to the list of World Cultural Heritage Sites.
Our musical journey leads inexorably north as we follow the mighty Vltava. The river widens as it cruises into Prague on its journey to the Elbe and eventually into the North Sea.
Prague's been here for a while and has a rich history. One of the early kings of Prague was Wenceslas, born in 907 AD, the very same Wenceslas as in the Christmas Carol.
In the Middle Ages, during the reign of Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV, Prague flourished. It was bigger than either Paris or London. The town square is still flourishing, and because so much of the city retains its Baroque appeal, it's a booming tourist destination. Charles IV was a king who loved learning and the arts. He established many institutions in Prague, including the first university in Central Europe, called Charles University today. Despite many wars and fires, Prague Castle has grown from its 9th century origins into a unique complex, the largest of its kind in Europe. During the 16th century, the Austrian Habsburgs invaded Prague and assumed power. Rudolf II, described in his day as the greatest art patron in the world, turned the city into one of Europe's leading centers for the arts and sciences. But after Rudolf's death in 1612, the nation declined until the 18th century and the reign of Empress Maria Theresia, when many of the buildings we still see today were established. The 19th century saw a rebirth of civic pride in Bohemia, and a number of great public monuments were built, including the National Theatre.
The National Theatre has a great story. Over a number of years, during the period of growing nationalism, a public collection was taken up to build a theatre.
No sooner was it opened than the National Theatre burned down. But civic pride wasn't about to go up in smoke. The people opened their pockets once more, and the building was finally reopened in 1883. The festive and patriotic opera Libuscha by Bedřich Smetana was performed for the occasion. Smetana was the first Czech composer to draw on his cultural heritage for his work, folk melodies, rhythms, the actual history and language of his country. Smetana is considered by many to be the father of Czech music. In 1848, while scraping together a living as a pianist and teacher, Smetana opened a music school in Prague on the corner of the Old Town Square. It was during this time that he began composing. 8 years later, he moved to Sweden in order to advance his musical career. In 1861, he returned to Bohemia, hoping to take up the post of conductor at the Provisional Theatre, but he didn't finally get the nod until 5 years later. Prague is a city of such striking beauty that it's hardly surprising that one of the greatest Czech composers, Smetana, would want to write about it in his music. But to do so was also a loud and clear political statement. The Bohemians of the time, as Czechs were known in those days, really wanted their freedom back from the Austrians, their Habsburg neighbors who had not only stolen their political liberty but also their language. So Smetana wrote in his own tongue, for his own people, in the accents of his homeland, as can be heard to wonderful effect in his hilarious Bartered Bride. Even without words, his music speaks with a proudly Bohemian accent. Just think of the end of Vltava, as we should call it, not Die Moldau, as the Austrians preferred. Those resplendent orchestral sounds as the great river surges through Prague after its long journey through the Bohemian countryside. Within the massive grounds of Prague Castle is the city's most distinctive landmark, St. Vitus's Cathedral. St. Vitus was a young Sicilian martyr who was thrown to the lions during the Roman persecutions. A relic of a piece of one of his arms was sent to King Wenceslas as a gesture of goodwill from a neighboring king. You just don't send presents like that anymore. The cathedral houses a most eclectic collection of artworks and structures stretching from the Renaissance through to the 20th century. The graphic depiction of the murder of good King Wenceslas. This neo-Gothic altar, which is a more recent addition. A royal box for church. The tombs of kings and queens, including the final resting place for Wenceslas.
But this takes the cake. The bronze ring King Wenceslas clung to as he was murdered by his brother.
The most impressive landmarks in Prague seem to collect along the banks of the river Vltava. A most suitable home for the Czech Philharmonic Orchestra.
But the most impressive is the Dvorak Hall.
The Czech Republic's music traditions are still strong, and Czech musicians now occupy positions all around the world. Libor Pešek started out as a jazz trombonist. Now he has been chief conductor of the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra in England and appears everywhere from San Francisco to Tokyo.
To conduct here is always something special, not only because of its beauty, of its excellent acoustics, but also of the memories, who has conducted here and how they conducted. So yes, it's a shrine. Smetana was a person who, to my generation, is surprising in one thing. He decided for himself to be the founder of the Czech national music. The surprising thing he did was that he has chosen the Wagnerian Germanic idiom. So the vehicle for the future Czech music was a Germanic mechanism. And that would sound crazy. It worked. He really established Czech national music on German form.
Prague is known as the Golden City of 100 Spires, and in it pulses the heart of the Czech people. And it was Antonín Dvořák who, through his music, shared that heart with the world.
Dvořák learned the folk fiddle as a child and eventually became accomplished on the viola, playing in dance bands from the age of 18. After 9 years as a member of the orchestra at Prague's Provisional Theatre, Dvořák became the organist here at St. Adalbert's Church. He had been composing steadily in obscurity all the while. By his early 30s, his works in manuscript included symphonies and chamber music. And then, in 1874, Dvořák received his first real break.
He entered a number of works in a competition for struggling young artists, and one of the judges was Johannes Brahms, who was so impressed with Dvořák that he awarded him first prize, and from that time on took a deep personal interest in his career.
Brahms introduced Dvořák to his own publisher, who commissioned the Czech to write some Slavonic dances for piano duet. Playing exotic dances side by side with a close friend on a piano stool was a popular musical pastime in the 1870s, and Dvořák's Slavonic dances made him instantly popular in drawing rooms from London and Paris to all the way across the Atlantic.
He toured and conducted extensively, but in 1892 he set sail with his family for New York, where he became director of the National Conservatory of Music. Later, Brahms said, "I should be glad if something occurred to me as a main idea that occurs to Dvořák only by the way."
Antonín Dvořák was perhaps the most persuasive of all Czech musical ambassadors. The world fell in love with his music immediately. In Britain, we gave him an honorary degree at Cambridge University. In return, he let us have the world premiere of his 8th Symphony. In America, he was asked to teach at the National Conservatory in New York. Some of his paychecks bounced, but that didn't stop him from writing what is perhaps the most famous piece of American music, the New World Symphony. Well, if we exclude Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue and Copland's Fanfare for the Common Man. Dvořák's music was not the music of the immigrants, it was the music of the slaves, of the Native Americans, and it's notable for its power and its dignity. Dvořák returned to Prague for good after only 3 years in the United States and conducted here in the Rudolfinum, in the hall that now bears his name. He was hailed by the people as their greatest living composer. It was a long way from his impecunious days as a dance band fiddler.
And considering this, I'm going to play some Dvořák. I think he would have really loved this place.
One of the most acclaimed of Czech conductors and the principal guest conductor of the Prague Philharmonic, Zdeněk Machal, has conducted orchestras around the world.
Dvořák is very important, for me, for the Czech Philharmonic Orchestra, but also for all Czechs. But I will say not only for the Czechs, but I think for the whole world. And I think that Dvořák represents the soul, the spirit of the Czechs, if you look from the window, so that's exactly what we are, you know. So first, the sentimentality or the musicality or the emotional and all the things. On our other side is the rhythmical part of his music, which is also very important because it's a lot of rhythm in Czech character and Czech music, dancing, and I think that Dvořák put it all together in best way. So that's why he is one of the greatest composers in the world. The Czech Philharmonic, with Czech conductor as me, you know, our blood is the same, our breathing is the same, our emotions are the same, you know. So before I open my mouth, they give me already what I want. You know, I start to believe they are reading my mind. And after 30 years, I came back. I came home. And I tell you, it's like a dream. If you remember the Russian invasion in 1968, you know, I never believed that I will be back here, that communists stay here forever. And you know what? It changed everything. The whole world changed. But you know, I am home here. I am home where I was thinking that I will never be back. It went over 30 years. So I simply said, okay, I will die. I don't know where, but I will be not in Prague. And you know what? I will die in Prague, probably.
We're not the first film crew to recognize Prague's beauty. The film Amadeus was shot almost entirely in Prague, though it was set in Vienna. The main reason was that Prague is so well preserved and has so many public areas and buildings from the 18th century. It still resembles the Vienna Mozart knew.
There's another reason that it's kind of fitting that Amadeus should have been filmed here. That's because Mozart was probably more popular in his lifetime here than anywhere else.
Mozart had a very special affection for Prague. Two of his greatest operas, La Clemenza di Tito and Don Giovanni, were commissioned by the city and premiered there. Don Giovanni was a stupendous success in the city, and Mozart quite seriously thought of moving there after his father died in 1787, more particularly because the triumph in Prague was by no means replicated in Vienna. They had a decidedly lukewarm response to it. You might have thought that even the Viennese might want to go to see an opera on which Casanova was reputed to have been the special consultant, but Vienna was always, and still is, a city of sudden dislikes and rejections. Prague, on the other hand, is a famously welcoming city. Small wonder that Mozart took to it so enthusiastically and that Prague took to Don Giovanni with such warmth.
Don Giovanni wasn't absolutely complete by the time that Mozart and his librettist Lorenzo da Ponte arrived here in Prague in 1787 for the premiere of the opera. And so they had work to do. And they took rooms in opposite hotels. Mozart stayed in this one here on the right, Three Vičku, which means the Three Lions, and Da Ponte was staying in Platés over there. And when Da Ponte had some new lines that he wanted Mozart to set, he'd write them down and then fold them up into a paper dart and send them winging through into that room over there.
The Villa Bertramka was the summer house of pianist and composer František Xaver-Dušek and his wife. They were good friends of Mozart's and entertained him here on a couple of occasions when his operas were being performed in Prague. In fact, we owe some of Mozart's finest music to their hospitality. The house is now a museum and the strongest link to Mozart in Prague, apart from the music itself. It was in these rooms that he finished the scores for two of his operas before their world premieres in Prague. The salon here on the ground floor is where Mozart slept, and the music room is still used for chamber concerts.
Because of Mozart's friendship with the Dušeks, Prague grew to love him, and he said that the most beautiful moments of his life were spent here at Villa Bertramka.
This is the Estates Theatre in the heart of Old Prague, and it's forever linked with Mozart because it was here that he chose to premiere two of his most famous operas, Don Giovanni in 1787 and La Clemenza di Tito in 1791.
The people of Prague were really taken with Mozart. This statue shows the dark commendatore who drags the unrepentant, womanizing Don Giovanni off to hell.
There's a lot of history in this theatre. Carl Maria von Weber and Gustav Mahler conducted here, and Paganini, the famous Italian violinist, gave concerts here.
Founded in 1704, the St. Nicholas Church, in the part of Prague known as Lesser Town, is the most significant Baroque structure in the city.
The history of this church gives you an idea of just how much Mozart was loved in Prague. He played the organs here during his visit in 1787.
But shortly after he died in 1791, the whole city paid tribute to him through a number of performances of his Requiem by the Prague Theatre Orchestra, here within St. Nicholas. I have the fondest personal feelings, both for Mozart and for Prague. In 1979, I was lucky enough to play the part of Mozart in the very original production of Amadeus at the National Theatre in London, and then 5 years later, I played Emanuel Schickenader in the film that Milos Forman made from it.
Salieri? Yes. Can we come in? Well, better not. He's sleeping. He's all right, though? Oh, yes, he's just exhausted. He became dizzy. That's all.
Schickenader's a remarkable character. He wrote the libretto for the Magic Flute and, of course, played Papageno in it, and was also the very first Austrian Hamlet. Quite a remarkable man. Peter Schaffer and I used to wander around the streets of Prague, and in those days, still under the communist regime, there was often a curfew at around 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening, and the streets simply emptied, not only of people, but of almost any sign of the modern world. And it really did seem to us often in those slightly eerily quiet and empty streets where you could hear your own footsteps echoing around the walls, that Mozart might just suddenly nip out with that unnerving giggle of his and say something cheeky and then run away again. They'd kept the old town almost exactly as it had been.
The Czech Republic drinks more beer per capita than any other country in the world, and they've been brewing it here at U Fleku since 1499. The place was bought by Mozart's playboy friend Jakob Flakowski, and he called it U Fleku, which means at the flex. Cheers!
There's so much to see in this city. You could spend weeks in the castle and cathedral alone and not see all of it.
Well, who wouldn't be inspired by this fairy tale of a city? Mozart certainly was, and wrote some of his most adorable and dramatic music for it. But perhaps it really belongs to its own composers, Dvorak, and above all, Smetana, the man who set the great river to music. So, where to next week? Next classical destination? Eisenach in Germany, birthplace of Johann Sebastian Bach, the father of classical music. Don't miss it, sights and musical sounds. Goodbye. I'm Simon Callow. See you soon.